Welcome to the Never Been Promoted podcast and YouTube channel. I'm on a mission to help you cut the time to all the things that are holding you back so you can unleash your entrepreneur. Hey, welcome here to Never Been Promoted. Hi, I'm Thomas Helfrich, your host. We are joined today with Collin Graves. He's a badass, special ops leader, turned into a data empire king. He doesn't have a crown on. You would never know it. He'd be the guy on the beach that could buy the beach. I'm just kidding. I don't know this. I'm just messing up. He seems like a pretty awesome dude because he's going to have a story that you're just going to we'll let him tell it. But like a very, very powerful story and guest today coming in. Very clear on our mission, guys. We are here to help you get better at entrepreneurship. And you're doing that by learning from other entrepreneurs, getting that like little nuggets of information, micro mentoring, if you will. I want you to help you cut ties to the things that are holding you back. I mean, my silly little tie here is a metaphor. At the same time, it's completely uncomfortable. And I wear more ties now than I ever did working for a company, though I've never been promoted. Maybe I should have worn more ties. I don't know. Who cares? Here is what we're going to do next. You're going to do one thing for me, because I want you to get more information, and I need to do one shameless plug, I'm told. It is for you to go to neverbeenpromoted.com. Check out our resources on there. We have a bunch of cool links to the YouTube channel, all the podcasts, things like that. So, by the way, if you got a tie, cut it off right now, just for fun. Tag me to post. I'll repost it. It'll be fun. All right, enough of this craziness. Colin, you want to come to the stage? Are you on the stage? I think you're on the stage. Hey, it's Colin. How are you, man?
Doing well, Thomas. Glad to be here.
Listen, I'm so happy you're here. This is like you do really have a crazy kind of good story, and you seem unstoppable. Like you go one way, like, I don't want to do that anymore. I'm going to go this completely different way that everyone else went, and I'm going to do it better. So, does that sum it up?
Well, yeah, I think my journey's been untraditional for sure. Definitely grew up in, a community where you sort of went to school, then you went to college, then you worked some internships, you got a job, and, got married, had 2.5 kids and a dog and a white picket fence, and certainly chose to go a different direction. Had a family unit that was very supportive of me taking risks and going in a different direction. So I definitely am fortunate for that. But yeah, it's been like a funky Tarantino movie almost. How my life has unfolded.
Yeah, though. You know what? Do this. So, where do you live? What part of the country do you live in?
I live in Scottsdale. I've been here for about 4 years.
Okay, Scottsdale. I've been there to play golf. Lovely. But tell me the one hidden treasure that locals don't want visitors to know about.
Oh man.
I mean, are you going to get murdered if you say this? They're like, dude, you can't tell people about that.
Well, I don't know how much of a secret it is. It's definitely more of the hipster crowd. And my favorite bar in town to go and get really creative mixology creations has the weirdest name. And hopefully you don't yell at me, but it's called Killer Whale Sex Club. And it has nothing to do with what it sounds like. At first, when my friend said, "Hey, we're heading to this place," I went, "I'm not sure I belong there. I'm not sure really." Yeah, not sure where you picked up on the vibe that I'd be interested in. They went, just trust us. And it's a very small rehabbed house on Roosevelt Row in Phoenix, and absolutely amazing drinks, cool vibes. I'm a huge fan, and it's down in a part of town that's growing really quickly. It used to not be the center of attention. It used to be a little bit more on hard times, but really an interesting place. I haven't been since I had a kid, but I'd love to get back there.
Yeah. To be clear, your wife maybe had the kid. You participated in making the kid. We got to make that sure we get this right, man.
I have I have very little responsibility for most of the process. So
Right.
I'm eternally grateful to her.
I'll give you credit. You had like 58 to 62 minutes of process of this. It was amazing. 58 to 62.
Exactly. Yeah. We take more credit than we're owed for.
That doesn't include
that.
cuddling. I mean, that was actual work. So, which wasn't work. I mean, honey. Anyway, we'll just keep. Do you want to set up kind of what you're doing today, and then jump in? Go back to the future, right? So go back and set up how you got there.
Sure. So today I run a company called North Labs, and we really specialize in helping organizations make use of the data they already have to drive operational excellence within their company. We work primarily across manufacturing and industrial, higher education, and then technology and professional services companies sort of make up the minority of our customer profile. Certainly our reputation has been built around manufacturing and industrial. The whole idea is these industries have been navigating off of gut instinct since the beginning of time. And it just so happens that it's one of the most complex types of businesses to operate because there's so many inputs required to create an output, right? You need lots and lots of raw material, people, machinery, logistics, fulfillment in order to create just a single item, a single product or a widget. And our specialty is coming in and saying, all of the systems that you use, whether it's software systems or it's operational technology like your machines themselves, all produce footprints of data, breadcrumbs of data that we can wrangle and help you solve problems with, whether that's fulfillment, whether that's maintenance. There's such a wide-reaching variety of things that can be done. It's just really, really interesting.
Is that really more for bigger companies? Like my company, I'm not sure I have any data footprints outside of the things you think of, or am I thinking about that too narrowly as a tiny company?
You have more than you think, for sure. I mean, our target customer sits really comfortably between the $50 million and $500 million range, maybe the $100 to $1 billion range. We've worked with some giants out there, but frankly, I love working with the more of that mid-market manufacturer who is saying, look, we've been making inputs on the steering wheel on a quarterly basis with Excel spreadsheets, and we're entering an era where you're going to need to start making decisions faster with better support and really empower everyone within your organization to do the same. And that's really where our mission stands for that. But I've been in the cloud computing space for 17 years, entirely self-taught. I learned about it while I was in the military and decided that I wanted to hitch my wagon to that horse. I figured it would sort of be a big concept in the future. And so I've been building companies around cloud computing now for 17 years. This is the second group that I've started in this space. I'm an angel investor and owner of other businesses, but really my career has been built around cloud computing.
Yeah. Well, back up. So special forces and NATO or special ops. Well, I guess it's the same equivalent. So can you take me, because I'm curious to see how NATO Special Operations really kind of impacted how you thought about leadership and problem solving and just the being in the business world. So I can tie those two together. Can you take me back and that journey and any significant moments maybe that you're really kind of formulating?
For sure. Yeah, and it's important to call out. I served in support of NATO Special Operations, so I do not want to be misconstrued as a Navy SEAL, MARSOC, Green Beret, Delta Force, Army Ranger. Those are our heroes, my heroes, and people who I was fortunate enough to fly with nearly every day of my life for 4 or 5 years. and learned so much from them in terms of executing on a campaign, in terms of leadership and delegation and grit. But yeah, I joined the Air Force out of high school. I was not planning to. I was planning to do Air Force ROTC and pursue a baseball scholarship. When you're 5'9" and 160 pounds at the time, you don't have a ton of prospects coming after you from a collegiate perspective, even though I had played high level baseball for most of my life. I would have certainly wound up sitting on the bench somewhere at a D1 school, probably down at the far end of the bench, if I'm being honest. And I decided to follow my dad's footsteps. He was an enlisted Army Airborne professional, and I decided that enlisting was the right move for me. I was originally going to join the Marine Corps. Then I sort of considered the Army, and really with the help of my father, I settled on the Air Force, or chose the Air Force. No settling at all, and went into aircraft maintenance. I essentially became a mechanic. Now, I was a kid who loved cars. I used to race go-karts and loved to work on cars, but that's really where my mechanical aptitude ended. And my first assignment was Ellsworth, South Dakota. You know, all my friends are getting stationed in California and Florida and Texas. And I drew the lucky straw of Ellsworth, South Dakota, which is the coldest place on planet Earth, I'm convinced, and has the absolute most difficult aircraft to work on in the military's fleet, in the B-1.
Like, how am I supposed to screw these little screws?
Oh, I've got a story for you. But so the B-1 is the most active aircraft.
Wait, let's back up. Who did you piss off to get there? Let's just
that's what I'm still trying to figure out.
Was it that, or were you just not a squeaky wheel? I mean, 2 squeaky wheels get replaced, but like the right level squeak gets some oil.
You know, I think there was demand for I'd scored very high on the ASVAB test relative to, you have to join the Air Force. It has the highest
It's a smart
testing.
I don't mean it means, but they're considered the smart guys and the nerds of.
That's right. That's right.
A lot of rides in the air.
And so for whatever reason, I got assigned Ellsworth, and it's the most active aircraft since 9/11. It's been, hovering around the AOR, the area of responsibility, since 9/11, 2001. So it's the most active aircraft. It's also the least mission capable aircraft in the military's fleet, which means it's broken all the time. And it's specifically broken with its hydraulic components that run its landing gear. And, the B-1 can sweep its wings back to fly over the speed of sound. And guess what I got assigned to? Hydraulics. So what a wake-up call for me to go in and say, hey, yeah, you've dinked around changing the oil on your dad's car. Now we're in the big leagues. And like you said, at times we wouldn't get pulled off the flight line until -40-degree wind chill. I once had my hands both frozen to the aircraft with gaseous nitrogen in -20-degree weather, panicked and ripped them off of the aircraft, and had a...
What's the proper protocol besides yell for help and not cry?
Those 2 things for sure. I happened to be stranded like way out on the flight line near where the Boeing engineers would work on things. So, and my walkie-talkie had died. So there was really...
do anything, like,
Yeah. So I panicked and I pulled as hard as I could. And when we used to call them the bread truck, where you'd get dropped off at different aircraft, luckily showed up about 3 minutes later. And mind you, it's like -20 outside. And I had taken off my Carhartt to wrap my hands in the Carhartt. So I'm standing out there in a t-shirt, and my tech sergeant was like, dude, what are you doing? And I think I had some shock, and I just went, hey, I think I need to go to the hospital. He's like, what are you talking about? Like, you're trying to get out of work. What's going on? And I showed him my hands, and he was like, okay, let's go.
Just don't.
So anyway, I deployed very quickly there. That was my first tour overseas.
Now you can commit crimes because you have no fingerprints. It's great.
Luckily, they grew back. I don't know what kind of witchcraft they used on me. I don't know. It could be,
You never tested that, did you?
yeah,
Now
I
you're running
haven't.
in 2 different
I
states.
haven't. Yeah. Might be,
Somebody else threw back your fingerprints. We don't know.
exactly. So did my first tour with the B1s over there, and sort of caught the attention of a chief master sergeant over there who I'm incredibly indebted to professionally. He actually got reassigned to Ramstein Air Base in Germany. And the rule was, if you get assigned to Ellsworth in South Dakota, you go there to die, because there's such a high demand on that aircraft that it's almost impossible to leave that base. So you either get out of the military or you spend 20 years there. And by that time, you've probably married a South Dakotan gal and live somewhere in South Dakota and have your 2.5 kids. But for whatever reason, Chief Shields, shout out Chief Shields if you're listening to this. He's definitely not. He's retired on a beach somewhere, I'm sure. But within 3 months of him going over there, I received orders while deployed, which also never happens, to Ramstein. And so after my tour of duty, I went back to Ellsworth for about 2 weeks and then went to Germany, did the same thing on a much nicer aircraft, the C-130J. That was like going from an old Yugo to working on a Honda Civic. Like the thing just ran. It was brilliant. And so it gave me the opportunity to become all systems qualified, which I'd also done on the B1. So not just hydraulics, but electrical, avionics, weapon systems, engines, etc. And that afforded me the position to become a flying crew chief with first Ramstein, and then, just due to working hard and staying disciplined, I eventually got the call up to help support NATO response forces. And so my life consisted of being the least impressive person on an aircraft at all times, almost every day of my formative years, because there'd be special ops pilots, pretty cool, loadmaster, pretty cool, 82 Navy SEALs, and your boy.
It seems like a lot of Navy SEALs from a risk standpoint to put on one plane. That's a lot of money in training right there. That seems like a lot.
Got another story for you there too, but
throw it in there. Let's go. We'll get to your business here eventually.
Yeah. So, a bit of a contentious conversation, I'm sure, but you'll recall when Benghazi went down in 2011.
Yep.
And, folks said, hey, we didn't have troops in the area to respond. I was on the second plane out of Sigonella, Italy, who were in flight before we got turned around to head back to Sigonella to not go and help with what was going on the ground in Benghazi. So you talk about the scariest moment.
At least in the movie. So leave it that, and I don't have any access beyond that.
Yeah.
You're saying that you guys were en route or able to go en route and were called off.
That's correct.
And only a few people in this world can actually make that call, if I'm understanding that right.
That is correct. And it was above anybody at my base for sure. But you talk about the scariest moment of my military career and something that really humbled me. I've been shot at. I've had mortars explode at me. I've, bombs go off, whatever. When you have to get on the intercom, when you're 20 minutes out from your drop zone, and special operations, let's not beat around the bush. These are a different sort of animal. These folks, they are truly the best of the best. But what happens when you get close to a drop zone is that a switch flips in their mind and they become the spawns of Satan, right? These otherwise like God-fearing, soft-spoken men start foaming at the mouth and their eyes turn red. And this, I'm not joking, right? They get into work mode, and because they're getting ready to go and do something that no one else on the planet can do. When you have to get on the intercom as a 21-year-old and say, hey, the lot of you, all 82 of you, any one of whom could kill me with 2 fingers.
Just looking at you wrong. He'd be like,
we're not going to go. You're not going to be able to go and do your job and help out your fellow warrior I was so scared that I climbed up onto the flight deck where the pilots are, and I removed the crew ladder behind me, and I put the anti-tamper tape around the handles so no one could get up. Because military aircraft are loud. There's not a whole lot of insulation, right? Insulation creates weight. You can't haul as much. You could have heard a pin drop. 82 of these Navy SEALs all staring at me with red eyes. And I had to tell them that they weren't going to be able to go and do their jobs. Scariest moment of my life.
Why weren't they allowed to do their jobs?
That's well above my pay grade.
It was like called off, and they're like,
it was called off. Yep, we got the command to turn around, and
all. Do they actually make noise and start complaining, or they just kind of get pissed?
No, that's no use. I mean, they could have beat up a flying crew chief for sure. But no,
I know you're the messenger, though.
Yeah, they do.
Now, if you said, "Hey, just kidding, guys, we're going in 18 minutes," they may.
Yeah. By the way, just kidding. Now you're extra mad. No,
they'd be like, you know what? We are going to duct tape you to something, and someone's going to have to find you.
Oh, 100%.
And they're not even going to get in trouble for it. I mean, nothing's going to happen to them. They may have to do an extra mile with a 40-pound weight vest on or something.
But all I remember is that call came from very high up because our pilots were arguing back with Ramstein, and the person who relayed that message was like, look, this is not from us. It's from somewhere much higher. We're just not going. So you're going to have to go back to Sigonella and eat pizza and caprese salad with 82 Navy SEALs who are coming off of a deliberate adrenaline rush.
Those humans don't register fear like a normal human.
No. And it's because of the training, right? It's the physical training. And I can say this not being one of them. I'm for sure not one of them, but just being around them. It's the physical training that they endure, but the mental reprogramming that goes on with these folks is the most impressive piece of any special operations fighter. And it's not just in America, although America is the crown jewel of it. The British do it very well. I think the Australians do it really well, where you learn how to, you almost have two modes. You have everyday sort of normal mode, and you can basically turn into the Hulk and do your business and then switch on back. And it's really impressive. And it taught me a lot about, discipline and grit and perseverance that carries over into business for sure.
Well, I would think, yeah, I mean, I would think there's programmed differently, but okay. So you're in this support role. You've seen it. I'm sure you've lost a friend or two along the way on this. How's that kind of help shape who you became?
Well, my part of my son's name is after my best friend who was killed overseas. His middle name is Robert. And we lost Robert Hernandez, who was my closest friend in the military. For me, it taught me some of the softer side of things. I mean, there's, obviously we need to take care of our military and our veterans better in America than we tend to do. Right. But for me, it was just the sort of time element and appreciating what you get, because it can get taken away from you. And so that really, on days when I wake up and I'm feeling like I want to procrastinate or don't want to get things done, all I have to do now is look at my kid and go, not only is it my kid and I want to perform for my kid, but I also see Robbie as well. And that's just an extra little kick in the ass for me, because I don't get to make excuses.
Right. And he didn't get to be here to enjoy it. Right. And so,
right.
Man, that's and that mentality, some people have that innately, and maybe it is, maybe they just have something in the childhood set them to it, whatever. But, the fact that you grew something from a horrible loss, right? For a traumatic loss is I think the amazing thing, because a lot of people don't do that. I talk a lot about cutting ties, right? The things that hold you back. That could have been a major tie for you. Just right. What's the point? What's this matter? There's two ways you go with that. And it seems like you went more positive way, though it doesn't make it probably any easier. It's still today, but I think that's I look for these reflective moments sometimes, and I think in your life you can draw upon things and make excuses and feed those excuses with fears and etc. and never get out of it, or you can bust out of it. So good for you on that. I'd say it that way. Fast forward a little bit. So tell me about the exit of military, when that happened, how that happened, and how you got on to where you are now.
Sure. So I got out in late 2013, mid 2014, and I actually got out 6 months early under President Obama. So normally when the military does force shaping, if they come and say, hey, our budget only allows for this many troops, so we need to reduce our troop count by this much, typically they're cutting the bad eggs first. So you've had disciplinary action, you're failing your physical tests, whatever that might be. But for 1 year, and I don't know if they've done it again since. I knew they hadn't done it before. It was the first time ever. The Obama administration came out and said, hey, we understand that some of you are planning to get out and you have things on the outside. You've been admitted to a university. You want to start a business. You want to go into the trades, whatever the case may be. Feel free to apply and we'll select the most deserving of you. So 7,000 of us applied. And it was, at the time I'd been accepted into a couple of schools. I was running my first company, sort of moonlighting from overseas in Germany, selling to construction companies.
You're allowed to do that? You're allowed to moonlight when you're in...
Well,
no, but I did it anyway because I was you can't just go flat. You got 6 months or so out, and you're like,
yeah. I mean, I wasn't holding any like senior leadership position where there's conflict of interest or anything, and I was getting my work done. I'm
not sure. The guys that I met when I've been around in more the consulting side, working on Air Force and your cyber command world, those guys were shooting 12-hour shifts 6 days a week. I'm not sure how they would ever have time for any side hustle, let alone sleep.
Yeah.
And so
the
fact that you can do that was amazing.
Yeah. We were 10, 12 hours a day, 5-6 days a week. That was at base, but I was flying 280 days a year, which some days it'd only be a couple hours. We need to reposition the aircraft and whatever. Some days it's like, hey, you're going to be drinking some Red Bull because it's going to be a long where you're going to be napping in a hammock in the back of the tail cone of a C-130. But I figured out a way just to start small, and I had started a group called Cloud CTO back then. It effectively what we did, this was before SaaS model was a thing, right? Software as a service. So you log into your software, like we log into everything today. We log into X, we log into Instagram, we log into our email, whatever. That wasn't as common back in 2010. It was sort of a newer model that was taking hold. Effectively, what my group was doing was building Dropbox for construction services companies to be able to share large format files in the field over 2G cellular. I don't know if any of your listeners remember 2G, but that used to be a thing and it sucked.
The majority of my listeners know what that is.
Okay, good. So, then I sold it shortly after getting out, and a brilliant guy named Drew Houston started Dropbox, which would have definitely put me out of business like within 10 days. So luckily I was in the right place at the right time. But yeah, 7,000 of us applied, a little under 700 of us got it, and started my sort of entrepreneurial journey officially at that point.
Fantastic. Well, so you sell it, you get a little money, you get a little pension, or whatever you get from the military. How did you get on to where you're on now? Like, so what was the moment?
So when I sold Cloud CTO, it was really early cloud days, to the point where when I tell you I was getting chased out of boardrooms with pitchforks and torches, it's not really that big of an exaggeration. People just didn't get it. They were very, there was a lot of aversion to the cloud. And I just knew that it was going to be a big deal. And when I sold the first company, I had to sign my life away with a 2-year non-compete. Yeah, I'm a 24-year-old kid. You get some lawyer off the street who doesn't know what the heck they're talking about. So I signed a 2-year non-compete, which effectively said, not only will you not start a business in the cloud space, you won't start any business in any space for 2 years.
That's almost non-enforceable, though you probably couldn't afford to defend it.
Right. I probably could have, but I ended up doing cloud consulting for groups out in, the Bay Area, in San Francisco, in Chicago, groups that were starting to embrace the cloud and make this move. So when that non-compete expired in 2016, I knew, hey, I'm going to do this again. The market is more mature now. We're more ready. We've gone through sort of the initial hype cycle. I feel like I could really make an impact. And, here we are 8 years later, and it's been incredible. We just crossed our 1,000th project mark as a team. We've helped hundreds of customers, from the, gigantic manufacturing firms in the world down to, smaller generational, jewelers and sort of everyone in between. It's been a hell of a ride.
That's awesome. What's the biggest, I always ask people kind of like for any business, what's the desperate problem you solve? What's the problem your customers are willing to do anything to solve?
My customers, and particularly in manufacturing and industrial, have been squeezed from all angles in the US economy for the last 10 years. That is wage inflation and unions, it's regulations, it's just the cost of creating product.
Yeah.
And they're a relenting bunch. I have such admiration for folks in that industry, because it's not like, you're not going out and providing a simple service. What I do is relatively even simple compared to what a traditional manufacturer does. But what they're desperately looking to solve is, how do we grow profit margin without needing to add a linear number of people? Because people are always the most expensive part of your P&L, bar none. Doesn't matter what company you are. And how can we do that while also sort of maturing in our ability to make decisions, drive automation, drive efficiency? This is it's something that every manufacturer struggles with in some capacity. And luckily we've gotten good at delivering results for them.
Yeah, well, I mean, and that's, we'll dive into kind of your business a little bit more here in a second, but you started this, you've gone through this journey of doing it again. What's your advice to an entrepreneur listening out there? And they could be doing anything, but what's kind of a holistic set of maybe principles you applied, and maybe you're drawing it from your past, but what would you tell entrepreneurs when you're out there, maybe it's your first run, second run, what do you tell them to do?
Move as quickly as possible, and don't worry about scraping your knees, because you're going to scrape your knees. I think and you hear this, I mean, it's said almost to the extent that it sounds like a cliche at this point, of a really successful entrepreneur saying, I never stopped. I never gave up.
Well, I mean, I agree. If you don't give up, you don't lose.
Right. But it goes deeper than that, right? If you can think critically about a problem that persists in an industry, right? And you can build a solution that, where you can solicit feedback from folks and refine it. My biggest issue early on starting businesses was that I would change direction, however slightly, way too frequently. It was like shiny object syndrome. I felt like a squirrel.
Let's dive into that, because I think sometimes there's it's a really good topic, and I'll tell you why. I'm trying to think how to get this question right, and I'll probably scrape my knees doing it, and I'll probably rephrase it. But when you're first starting out, you change direction for a couple reasons. One, you're like, oh my God, if this doesn't work, I got to go work for somebody or whatever else. So you start seeing where you think the market or your customers or your prospects. So you bend a little bit, and everyone's telling you, oh, you need a niche, you got to do this. But then you're like, man, but if I get it wrong, I'm screwed. And so it's not so much now. Some people do it shiny object. I'm bored. They don't put the time in. But your personality, I don't think that's it. I mean, you went and learned you spent years in learning a whole plane. That was it. Like my world is this plane. I don't have to learn anything else but this plane and everything inside the plane. I know how many millimeters the handle and the flush goes, right? Like all of it. And that kind of mentality like allows you to do that. But if you're diverting within, let's say, your own plane from the metaphor of that, you're probably okay. Because you're learning and you're filling it out versus, hey, oh my God, I'm going to go look at the B2 now. Now I'm going to go on the side, read about F-14s, though we're not using them. Like that would be shiny object, but versus maybe I should solve this problem of the plane, or metaphorically. So take me through that, because that a lot of people struggle with where to focus their time. And I always tell them, does it solve the desperate problem? And if it's not around that desperate problem, then yes, you probably are wasting your time. So maybe dive into that from your perspective of shiny object and how to alleviate or identify what's shiny versus a pivot or like a course correction.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I mean, we could probably talk about this for.
You probably could have a whole podcast.
I think you could. Yeah, for sure. I think, here's what happens to new entrepreneurs, especially when they're just sort of maturing in their capabilities. You have your problem statement, you have your hypothesis of how to solve that problem, right? Which is your solution.
Right.
You start talking about it in the market, and someone says, well, Colin, I don't have that problem. I have this one. Can you solve that? And you go, hell yeah, I can solve that. Instead of, no, this is my hypothesis, right? It's like, well, I do want to start generating revenue. That would be great. So what happens is you take on that work. And what does that work do? Well, now you got a little revenue, but now you have to build process around that solution. You have to hire around that solution.
Market around it, all of it.
Market around that solution. And now you're, however much, you've diverted off course, however much. And then another customer comes to you and says, yeah, but. And you go, sure, keep turning the wheel. Well, guess what?
No, wait. So that's a good point. Yes, but turns you. If you solve the problem and you started on a different path, and they say yes, and now you're deeply solving something else for that same customer, go with that.
Yes.
That's an actually good spot to be.
I love that.
You've added,
yeah.
Yes,
yeah,
and
smart. Yeah.
is a pie grabber versus yes, but is a direction and change. Unless that yes, but goes back to the original hypothesis lines. But at the same time, it's like every great battle plan is changed as soon as the first shot's fired, or as Tyson says, Tyson's going to beat the shit out of Jake Paul. I'm just interviewing.
I hope so.
We'll get into that in a second here, but until you're punched in the face, you got to plan until someone punches you in the face. Right. But I will tell you, if the problem you were solving, you said makes you $10,000, and the person goes, yeah, but I really have this problem, and it made you 100. Go with the 100 and go resolve that problem. If there's a significant revenue increase, you may have found, you may just looked at a gift horse and said, no, I don't want that.
Yeah. Well, and none of this is meant to be taken as doctrine, right? Because one of the inherent, aspects of entrepreneurship is the ability to think dynamically in ways that, your peers cannot, and taking the risk, you're taking a risk one way or another. But so for me, it really was like when I started North Lab, say for the first, 2-3 years, we really became a generalist in the cloud computing world. So we had customers reaching out for, hey, we want to move our workloads from our data center to the cloud. Okay, that's one swim lane. Hey, we want to increase our security in the cloud. Cool, another swim lane. Yeah, now we want to build applications. We want to. I tell you what, like 2018, we didn't start really popping in growth until right before COVID. So is that
when you guys got focused on something and repeated it?
100%. Yeah. So we were like so scattered, and I didn't have a huge company at the time. There was like 13 people. And I'm like, okay, so Thomas is dealing with cloud migrations, and I'll handle data, and you handle app dev. Well, what ends up happening is you say you can do everything, but you can't do any one thing well enough to garner a hell yeah from the customer. And hell yeahs from customers are the best possible marketing that you will ever have. Yeah. But it's like,
Yeah.
If you are just a mediocre supplier of goods, you are a commodity, and all you are to the customer is transactional. But if you go into a customer situation and you say, we are deeply knowledgeable about this field, and you prove that to them, not only do they say, oh my gosh, so for every dollar I spend with you, I make $2. So now I was spending 10. Now I want to spend 100 because the ROI is very, very clear to me. So
That's
for
right.
us, it was data and analytics. Because
I think a reflective moment here is when you're looking at your business. I tell people there's all this time, and you agree or disagree or but there's two reasons people buy things, and one is better than the other. And when they're combined, it's a no-brainer. They buy it to make more money or save a shit ton. And they don't typically quantify, by the way, time to money directly. It's usually like, do I actually save physical money or do I actually make more revenue? And if you can make both happen, which is what technology can typically do, or even data, because you get scale, you make money. And when you were looking at your business, I bet you could probably look at the ones that you ended up getting rid of that they weren't solving make more money problems. They were probably more of they're on the efficiency side or et cetera. And that's probably fair, right? Like you were like, that's not really, I can't go ROI on that business case. Exactly.
And this is why this podcast is worth listening to. And to all of your listeners out there, Thomas was not briefed on that, but he guessed it, right?
I use my critical thinking in the moment to discern that information from you.
It was brilliant. But here's the thing. Here's the caveat to it. You're absolutely right. But at the time, that undifferentiated piece was driving about 75% of my revenue.
Listen, I will give it. I'll come down to small marketing land. We right now, instantly relevant. I don't know any company that manages LinkedIn profiles and business pages better. Like we do it for a few $1 billion companies down to the solopreneur. And the reason is 2.5 years ago, we got rid of 75% of our revenue that was doing other things that deflated our brand. People weren't quite sure what we did. Are we a do-it-all ARC agency or do we do LinkedIn? We said, you know what? We're just a LinkedIn agency that has a system. Use it. Now, once tip of spears in, we can do some other thing, bring partners in. But you go in that shock zone of, I have to reduce this much cost, revenue. But once you break through the other side, it's just a repeatable. Now my teams can repeat it with a handful of people where it took 20 before. Anyway, so I'm with you on this. It works on any level of where's the most valuable piece of your asset that can be repeated with less people.
Exactly. Yeah. Like we were migrating a ton of customers to the cloud. But the thing about that is there is no business growth that comes with that. You're basically saying like, yeah, it'll be better to run, like, and it might be cheaper. Maybe it might be faster. Maybe, but there's really nothing to prove. And for me, the thing that drove me nuts was like, I have no way to sit down with these stakeholders and say, look what we just delivered for you, which we do now. And it's the most impactful part of my business is the quarterly business reviews that we do with these stakeholders. Like you invested this much money and you will make this much money over the next 5 years as a result. Where do we want to go next?
I mean, it's for you, for them, it's like, so you're making their jobs easy because so when you get to a certain level of business where people are writing checks from budgets where they're not, it's not the same suit, different pocket. And they're, if I didn't pay you, I could actually go on vacation. Like once it's more about keeping my job position and making my bonus. So there's no emotional attachment to budget. The next thing that goes up is attachment to their job because of board. And if the CFO can say, hey, here's the business case. I've proved it. The CEO goes, hey, we invest in this cost. So we need budget to pay for this investment, but it's producing this. Here's the math. Here's proved. You're almost guaranteed them to say, well, why don't we put $200 in instead of the 100? What does that do for us? And if you've shown in that business case, well, listen, if you did this other thing, you should see a 1.8 return. They're going to say yes. And you're going to double your revenue.
And the neat thing about that is at that point, discretionary budgets go away. Yeah, right? Like budgets are decided for discretionary things. But if you can sit down with a C-suite, which is, our target sort of persona who we sell to is the CFO. That is our absolute favorite persona to sell to because I'm going to make you money with data you already have, right? You probably tried on your own and failed and burned a lot of money in the process. we're going to do sort of this all you can eat buffet. You pay us the same amount every quarter. We worry about all the resource allocation and who to bring in and budget planning and all that stuff. You just sit back and watch your numbers improve, right? But if you can do that and establish those relationships with strategic stakeholders like a CFO, guess what? Somebody might come and say, hey, boss, that we don't have the budget for that. And they'll go, find it. Find the budget for that, because we know we're going to make more money as a result.
Right.
Budget conversations go away. And so we get into the fortunate position with some of our customers where we say, look, we're actually going to charge you 5 times more this next year than we did this year, because you believe in our ability to execute and create this ROI. And the customer goes, yeah, let's do it. Like,
Yeah, just
of course.
game.
Yeah.
Interesting from if people think about, it's like the Hyman Miller, your technical cock blockers are likely working for the CFO. So that's
Right.
Exactly. Your chief digital officer or your CIO maybe is peer-to-peer, and then they won't, as long as you can answer that question. But if they work for the CFO, which oftentimes is the case, you're in a mid-sized company, the technologist rolls up to them, they're going to say yes.
Exactly.
Yep. Your job depends on it. So I love that. Look to the future. By the way, I wanted to make a comment, I think, too. When you were coming into cloud, because you had seen and you kind of gone all in on it, you took a risk to say, hey, this should be a big tech. And I think if people think about their businesses and it seems new, but it seems to be like, if you're kind of like, hey, I think I'm going to build my business around AI somehow, you're probably in a good spot. It's going to be around to grow. This is when you can be a generalist, because there's not a ton of competition and everybody's kind of figuring it out where their niche will be. And that's the Accentures and the big people and all of them in the world. But once the market gets mature, if you didn't narrow down, you lose. You're out. You're a tier 3 or 4 consulting company that's getting crushed by the Indian. And so if you don't niche down and say, I'm high value, this is all we do, and this is what we do, you would not be here. I might be, because at some point, it's just too big of an industry to be general. But in the early days, you pull it off.
Exactly. If your value is deflated, you become a commodity and you begin to compete as a commodity. And what does that mean? You're competing solely on the basis of price. Mm-hmm. And there is not one successful company in the world whose sole value proposition is lowest prices. You might say, well, what about Amazon? No, they have the best distribution and logistics system ever created globally, right? Their prices are, cheap for their homegrown products, but that's because they can afford to get them to your door so much more efficiently than anybody else, right? So if you find that you're competing on the basis of price, you will lose even if you haven't yet. So it's a nice sort of, thing to take stock of over time. Because if you find yourself in pricing negotiation conversations all of the time, you need to wake up and recalibrate. My group doesn't even have an hourly rate. We don't have rate cards. We don't track hours times price equals this. It is, here's the price to get this shit done. Mm-hmm. Is that worth it to you or not? Right? Now we have our internal calculations for sure, but is this much money to create this much value to your organization worth it? And if you lose that customer, you just haven't done a good enough job articulating the value, because no CFO in their right mind is going to go, nah, I'd rather go with this group overseas who's going to charge me $450 an hour for a senior engineer. I really trust that they're going to get it done.
Listen, if they have the same value proposition, you might lose that deal to price. Yeah, that's fine. All things being equal. And I think,
but you don't want that customer anyway.
It depends, by the way, on a few things. If the signing authority, it depends on your deal size, just from bringing other entrepreneurs into the conversation on that. If the person you're talking with, and one of the biggest things you should always know if you don't know this is, what's the signing authority of the person you're talking to? Mm-hmm. And if they have, what I mean by that is, can they write a $50,000 check out of their budget without approval? If the answer is yes, you might want to price it right around that. Mm-hmm. If they have to go to 100 and then they have to go to their boss, and they're like, well, what about these other 3 companies? If you've done a vendor search, you're in a different play. So understanding that matters. And sometimes it's like, if they haven't said the budget's the issue, but you haven't articulated value, you just say that. Hey, what other value could I add in here to keep this investment, but to make sure that you're getting more out of it? Is it more consulting hours? Do you need some more support? Whatever it is. And the reason is because you're just not hitting the mark. And what often it does, it reveals what it is missing from your offer that you need to start adding in to make it a no-brainer. And I tell people, no matter where you are, pick up the Alex Hormozi thing and do the $100 million offers, or just use GPT because it understands it better, and go build it. So just conscious of time here. So this has been fantastic. I made my own artificial limit of about 55 minutes, but it's probably a good thing because people would fall asleep and hit dirt. Their cars would veer off the road. We don't want that. Look to the future. Where's cloud going? What are you most excited about?
Well, you called it out. We have not seen a move toward cloud attention since the advent of the cloud than what we're seeing right now with generative AI. Are we in a hype cycle? Absolutely, we're in a hype cycle, and it will sort of cool off a little bit as organizations figure out how to actually leverage Gen AI in a meaningful way. Because just turning on the Gen AI features of every single tool you have at your company is a terrible future strategy. And that's half the work that we do is, right? How can we take your data from all 100 systems within your organization, get them into one place, get them all speaking the same language, subscribing to the same laws of physics, and then we build Gen AI capabilities on top of that, right? Now that Gen AI is going off of a common context, so you don't have to worry about drift and hallucinations and all of this crazy stuff that happens with large language models. But that is for sure, Gen AI is the most compelling technological advancement I've seen in my career.
It'll become a layer technology too. So it'll sit underneath everything. What you're doing with data becomes even more important because especially if you have real data versus we need to create synthesized data, which would be, for those who don't, I'll probably misexplain it, but basically you take what looks like normal data and create fake data that looks like it so you can run models to make it more predictable because you just don't have enough for it to have certainty. Big problem in AI but that's going away because more and more data is getting collected. So, but I think it's a never-ending fuel issue. But I think the Gen AI piece, I think what people don't realize is how nascent it is.
Oh, we're so early on.
I think people are like, oh my God, the car, like this, we can't improve this car when they first came out. And you're like, oh, we need seatbelts, better braking, a roof, like, oh, better glass. It doesn't shatter and kill everyone in the car. Like that's where we're at with it's like the car has just came off the line. Everyone wants it. It's really affordable. They're not, it's super anyway. So the point is it might be more nascent than that. Like it is. Maybe the horse just got born. I don't know.
We're early. Yeah, you might have just bought a saddle for the horse.
Maybe. I mean, maybe we just discovered you can ride a horse. I think we've seen them in the wild. Yeah,
exactly. No, we'll continue to see it. I mean, the advancements now with what Anthropic is doing, I think they're the ones to watch. Obviously, OpenAI has, the most dollars, but I think Anthropic is the leader from an ingenuity perspective.
Big companies and money will win here. So they're just watching the ones who solve a specific function of it, and they're going to scoop them up. So if you're smart technically, go solve something in AI, and you're going to get bought.
Yep,
I wish I had more capability to do that because I would tell you, like, just solve around something Apple cares about, health. Go solve around Google, might be search, and they will pick up your company earlier than you want to sell it. But get rid of it.
Exactly.
Colin, thanks so much for joining me today. I appreciate it. Shameless plug for you, right? Where do you want people to go to get a hold of you?
Yeah, I'm off of social media other than LinkedIn, so connect with me there. /in/Colin with 2 L's, Graves, like dead people. Happy to connect, talk smart. I always want to make myself available to aspiring entrepreneurs, right? I've been around the track. Yeah. I've done this with my own companies, with companies I've invested in. Now we're working to acquire other companies in the home services space, and always happy to share my lessons learned with people who are trying to secure the future for themselves and their families.
It's wonderful. Thank you. I really appreciate coming on today. It's been a fantastic conversation.
This is great. Thank you, Thomas.
Thank you. I'm going to put you in the periwinkle room. I'll be right back with you as I say. I put you forward. You want to say the goodbye? I've done that twice today, by the way. Anyway, I'll see you in a few minutes. Thank you so much, Colin, for joining me today. Great, amazing story. And you wherever you are in your life, right? Maybe you're in the military now, and maybe you're doing something else. Here, I'll give you this last piece. I just went to a 30-year high school reunion, and it had dawned on me kind of like, your average age of death might be 74. I don't drink, keep care of myself a little bit. So I'm thinking 78 might be more possible. I am basically just graduating high school at age 48. And so if you think about wherever you are, you probably got 30 awesome years ahead of you, for the most part, are good ones. You can do anything with that. You can become anything. And it's going to take you to rewire, rethink, retool yourself a bit. But get out there, go become the best versions of yourself, and get out there and go and unleash your entrepreneur. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time,